Welcome to Kingdom of the Logos. I'm J. Dylan Proctor. Let's talk mob behavior and the Gospel of John. And if you hang around long enough, I'll give you some alternatives to being a part of an internet mob. So at the time of this video, there are some protests going on in Iran, and these appear to be quite serious protests. And the situation seems to be quite serious. And how do we know this? Well, if we hold up the scales of justice, we can see that the leaders there in Iran are some quite bad people, and they've been doing some quite evil things. And may God have mercy on their souls. And I really do hope that God can send some morally righteous individuals to bring stability to this society, because this is really what it's going to take. It's going to take people who can move away from sort of really the cyclical behaviors which have gone on there, which has allowed such horrible evils to happen. It's going to take people having a very high moral investment to really overcome the problems there in that society. And the cost is high. The cost is extremely high, and I hope that there are people able to make this investment. Well, anyways, let's move along to examine what goes on here in the West. We have a culture where people gather together, and they really get involved in what I would call hollow protesting. They get together and they protest things really incoherently, and this is quite a problem in our society. We have this vicious amount of mob justice which really trolls around the internet looking for people to attack. And my message for you today is don't give in to the mob mentality. Don't give in to mob behavior. Don't find yourself in the easy access internet mob. And you may ask, well, what's the problem with being in the easy access internet mob? Well, the thing is it's, again, there's a really easy threshold to get in the mob. There's no requirement of a moral commitment. And it's not just that there's no commitment. You don't have to actually invest morally into these things. You can be completely incoherent in one's morality. They can change one's moral ethics from one situation to the other with an entire inconsistency. And again, there's no cost there. So it's easy access, no commitment, and no consequences. And not only that, when people get involved in the mob outrage mentality on the internet, it's really hard to gauge reality. Again, you may have a few people who claim to be representing masses of others, and they may not actually be. You may have a few people who are really loud, and they seem like there's a lot more people there than there actually are. Or you may have people who seem like they actually care about an issue when they really don't. Whatever the current issue of the internet mob, whatever issue that may be, there may be a little bit of truth there, or there may be no truth at all. The outrage mob makes it really hard to gauge reality, and that's a problem. So as we go to the Gospel of John, we see that there was a very similar mob there in the later chapters of the Gospel. My congregation and myself, we've been studying the Gospel of John for quite some time now, and we're getting close to the section where the crucifixion happens, and of course the resurrection that follows thereafter. And this is a very serious part of the Gospel. It's a very serious part of Jesus' ministry. In fact, it's sort of the thread which holds everything together. It allows this new era for humanity to come into existence. And as we've been examining this portion, we find something really interesting in the Gospel of John, especially in John chapter 18 and 19, particularly in 19 is where I'd like for us to look today. What we see happening, basically, if you're not familiar with the Gospel of John, the time of Passover has arrived. The Jews have gone down to Jerusalem. They're there for Passover. This is why Christ comes. There's the whole incident with the triumphal entry. Jesus comes in. It's a really big deal. But then Jesus is betrayed. He's betrayed, and he's handed over to the high priest and sort of the religious leaders, and they want him to be crucified. They interview him. They're displeased with Jesus, and all within a few hours they take and they hand him over to Pilate, who is not a Jew. He is a Roman. And as they hand him over to Pilate, Pilate interviews him, and he doesn't really find anything wrong with him. But the Jews, again, their morality is really flexible at this point. They're not people who are thinking long term. And when I say Jews, I don't mean Jewish people. I mean the people in this story in John chapter 18 and 19, the mob in particular, not just all the people who are there who are Jewish, but the mob who is there is a group of Jews who do not agree with Jesus, and they want something done. They want him to be crucified. They want him to be killed. But again, it's really interesting because if you study the behavior of this mob, their morality is totally inconsistent. Even their logic is fragmented and it's stratosphered all over the place. There's just no coherency to it, except for one thing. The only coherent thing about the mob the mob that leads Jesus up to the cross is the fact that they're wanting their emotions to be dealt with. They're being entirely emotional driven, and they're not being long-term driven at all. They're not tuning into their more logical side of their own mind. They're just being emotional. And when we do this, we really set the course for disaster. So let me just read a little bit from this to show you what I'm talking about. So in John chapter 19, this mob is there. They want Jesus to be killed. And Pilate, who again, he's a Roman, he says, I find no fault with this man. I've interviewed him. There's not really a problem. But in verse 7, it's very interesting. The Jews answered him, and this is reading from the ESV. John 19:7 says, the Jews answered him, we have a law according to that law that he ought to die because he has made himself Son of God. All right. So in this verse, they're claiming he needs to die. He's claimed himself to be the Son of God. But of course, as we even look at this mob as a whole, so we go back and we read 18, we look at 19, they're not willing to kill him himself because they say we have a law against that. We can't morally kill him. Yet at the same time, they're all obviously trying to kill him. They're just wanting somebody else to do it by proxy. And then as we slip over to verse 12, again, we see some more logical incoherency. Verse 12 says, then Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, if you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar. Now, of course, what they're referring to is there's been this title thrown around, which again, you really see more concentrated towards the end of the Gospel of John, that Jesus is the king of the Jews. And they're saying anyone who makes himself a king of the Jews is an enemy of Caesar. Now, there's a lot of logical problems with that. One, why in the world would the Jews want Caesar to be the king over them instead of somebody who is an actual king of the Jews? But then, of course, there's the bigger and more obvious problem is that Herod the Great, the one who is killing children when Jesus is a child there around the time of the Nativity, he took on the title King of the Jews. In fact, he's really the first and only Roman governor who takes on a specific title like being a king. A lot of times people that were called kings may have not actually been kings. But Herod actually takes the title King of the Jews because he wants to be king. So again, it's very interesting. Jesus also with this name King of the Jews that he has not picked for himself as Herod did. But they are saying he makes himself a king, therefore he's an enemy of Caesar. Though obviously if the Roman Senate had allowed Herod to take the name King of the Jews, obviously there's some inconsistency there. But again, what we see happening with this mob is they're not concerned with being consistent. They're just wanting to be mob. They're wanting to behave emotionally. Well, my challenge for you is don't be the incoherent emotional mob. It's really easy to do that in our day and age. And as a pastor, we've got to instruct people better than that. And if you're listening to this, I have high hopes that you're probably not somebody who's part of the internet mob, but you may know someone who is. We have to pull our society away from the internet mob mentality. We've got to get away from mob behavior. Mob behavior is what led Jesus up to the cross. Again, I actually don't think all of these Jews who were here were people who would have as the broad picture of life, thought it was okay to have Rome kill somebody on your behalf so that you don't have to do it. I don't think they would have been okay with Herod being called king of the Jews, and I don't think they would have ever thought that Herod was an enemy of Rome just because of that. I think these are people who are just behaving emotionally, and people will do very terrible things. They'll do evil things when they start behaving emotionally. But again, emotional behavior is not always bad. People just have to balance it. You have to balance logic and emotion. So as a society, we've got to pull people away from the mob mentality. And my challenge for you is don't get involved in it, because again, here's some big problems with it. There's no moral commitment. Again, you can get online, you can post anything on social media, no moral commitment at all. You can change your moral perspective tomorrow. You can go with whatever the trending hashtag is, and that's how life is. This is not what our society needs. We've got to move away from that. There's no consequences to this either. Again, there's no consequences to action as long as you're part of the mob. What's interesting is there's extreme consequences for the mob's actions if you're on the receiving end of the mob, or receiving end of the mob's aim, I should say. But if you're within the mob, then you can get away with just about anything, and that's a really bad place for society to be. We have the concept of due process for a reason, and yes, that's part of the criminal justice system, but at the same time, we need to be people who understand due process in our lives. We don't just need to go out and be part of mobs. So here are some alternatives I have for you. If you are someone who posts a lot online, be a producer of quality. If you do a lot of online posting, whether it be text-based or picture-based, why don't you balance your time posting with a good amount of time researching. I mean, a lot of times people who are parts of mobs don't do very much time researching. They're not very well informed, or if they are informed, it's usually from secondary sources and they don't actually understand the concepts well. So not only do you need to be researched, but you got to be somebody of critical thinking too. So if you're someone who does do a lot of posting, make sure you're a one who posts quality. Be a quality producer if you're going to be really active on the internet. Make sure you don't just sound clever, but make sure you're actually doing everything you can to be producing quality material. Be someone who has something clever to say. Don't just sound clever. And hey, we don't always have to do things online. If you want an alternative to the mob justice, you feel angry about things going on in the world, here's a big challenge I have for you. And again, yes, this is coming from a pastor, full disclosure, but be involved in church life. If you aren't involved in church life, go find a church to be a part of. Of course, I'm a Nazarene pastor. Go be a part of a Nazarene church, but be involved in church life. If you are in church, go to your pastor, say, I want to be more involved in building the kingdom of God. Or better yet, just go out and start doing it. We need to be people who are active in society. Again, a lot of times people, they say, well, I want to be an activist. I want to support a cause. I want to fight the man. I want to bring power from the establishment. And again, they always find these hollow causes, which are really incoherent and fragmented, and they're just all over the place. My challenge to you is be a part of the kingdom of God, because if we actually want to be people who make society a better place, well, the best way to do it is teach other people good moral architecture. If we can be engaged in the kingdom of God, be engaged in the church, and say, we're going to build moral architecture in our lives, we're going to teach other people too, that's a whole lot of better course of action than any sort of backseat activism is, or just saying I'm going to change my profile picture to have a certain colored thing, or just do some sort of virtue signaling online. Either, again, just to wrap those two things up, if you are going to be online, make sure you're producing quality. And if you're looking for something outside of that, well, go talk to your pastor. Go find a pastor. Go find yourself a church. Be a producer in the kingdom of God, and be someone who builds up moral architecture in your life and build up moral architecture in others' lives.